The private terminal at LaGuardia Airport hummed with the quiet efficiency of wealth. Leather sofas that cost more than most cars. Crystal chandeliers casting diamonds of light across imported marble. This was where the elite traveled, where first-class tickets were considered slumming it, where private jets waited on tarmacs like loyal horses. And on this particular Friday evening, as autumn rain drummed against floor-to-ceiling windows, something happened in that gilded space that would expose a truth so profound it would ripple far beyond those pristine walls. James Mitchell stood in the center of the terminal, phone pressed to his ear, designer shoes tapping impatiently against the floor. 34 years old. Trust fund. Baby turned venture capitalist. The kind of man who measured his worth in zeros and other people's envy. Tonight, he wore a suit that cost $8,000, a watch that cost more than some people earned in a year, and an expression of perpetual irritation as if the world itself was failing to meet his standards. He had just closed a deal that would net him $7 million for 3 months of work, if you could call attending cocktail parties and signing documents work. And yet, as he barked instructions into his phone about market positions and portfolio adjustments, he felt nothing. Not joy. Not satisfaction. Just the hollow hunger for more. Across the terminal, moving with quiet dignity through the space, was Samuel Hayes. 61 years old. Dark skin weathered by decades of life and labor. Wearing the navy blue uniform of the cleaning staff. Pushing a cart loaded with supplies. Mop, dadu, bucket, bandai. Spray bottles filled with solutions that made the marble gleam like glass. Samuel had been working this shift for 3 years, arriving at 6 each evening, leaving at 2 in the morning. 8 hours of making invisible the traces of the wealthy, of ensuring their world remained pristine, of existing in spaces where he was seen but never noticed. His hands, calloused and strong, moved with practiced efficiency as he emptied trash bins and wiped down surfaces. But if you looked closely at those hands, really looked, you might notice something unusual. The way his fingers moved with a certain precision. The subtle scars on his palms that spoke of different work, different lives. The steadiness that came not from routine, but from discipline, earned in ways that had nothing to do with cleaning floors. Samuel had just finished polishing the brass railings near the entrance, when James's raised voice cut through the terminal's hushed atmosphere. "Where the hell is my pilot? I was supposed to be wheels up 20 minutes ago. This is unacceptable. Do you understand what unacceptable means? It means heads are going to roll." The woman on the other end of the phone, James's assistant Sarah, tried to explain. There had been an emergency. Captain Richards, his regular pilot, had been rushed to the VA hospital with what doctors suspected was appendicitis. They were working on finding a replacement, but on short notice, especially with the weather turning bad, it was proving difficult. "I don't care if you have to drag someone off the street. Find me a pilot. I have a meeting in Boston at 8 tomorrow morning that's worth more than your annual salary. Figure it out." He ended the call with a violent jab of his thumb and threw himself into one of the leather chairs, legs spread wide in a posture of entitled sprawl. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept across the terminal, and that's when they landed on Samuel. The older man had moved to the windows, quietly wiping away the fingerprints and smudges that accumulated throughout the day. For a moment, James simply stared, and something twisted in his expression. Not quite a smile. More like the look a cat gives a mouse before the final pounce. "Hey, you." Samuel glanced up, meeting James's eyes briefly before returning to his work. Years of experience had taught him that sometimes the best response was no response at all. "Yes, you." With the mop. I'm talking to you. Samuel set down his cloth and turned, his posture respectful but not subservient. There was a quality to the way he held himself, a quiet strength that spoke of dignity maintained through storms that would have broken lesser men. "Can I help you, sir?" James stood, walking over with the lazy confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. "I'm having a little problem. You see, my pilot had to go and get himself hospitalized. Inconsiderate, really. And now I'm stuck here when I should be halfway to Boston. Tell me something. You work here every day, right? You must see the planes taking off and landing. Looks pretty easy, doesn't it? Just push some buttons, pull some levers. How hard could it be?" Samuel's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of where this conversation was heading, of the type of man standing before him. "Flying requires training and certification, sir. It's more complex than it appears." James laughed, a sound without warmth. "Training and certification. Of course. Everything requires credentials. These days, can't even push a broom without a degree, am I right? But you know what I think? I think most of this stuff is exaggerated. People protecting their little kingdoms, making everything seem harder than it is so they can charge more money. I bet I could fly that plane myself if I wanted to. Hell, I bet even you could do it." He said it with such casual cruelty, such reflexive dismissal, that several other travelers glanced over. Samuel remained still, his hands clasped loosely in front of him, waiting. Years of patience had taught him that people like James always revealed themselves completely if you gave them enough rope. "In fact, let's make it interesting. You see that Gulf Stream out there? The one on pad 3? That's mine. Well, my company's. Same thing. Now, I'm going to make you an offer. If you can fly that plane, if you can get us off the ground and land us safely in Boston, I will give you $100,000. Cash. More money than you'll see in 5 years of pushing that mop. And, just to make it really interesting, my fiancée is supposed to meet me in Boston tomorrow. Beautiful woman. Way out of your league, obviously. But if you can fly that plane, if you can prove that all this supposed expertise is just smoke and mirrors, I'll let you be at the wedding. Front row seat to watch someone from your position witness true success." The cruelty was breathtaking. The assumption that a black man in a cleaning uniform couldn't possibly possess skills beyond manual labor. The casual way he weaponized his wealth and status. The reduction of a human being to nothing more than entertainment, a prop in his game of superiority. Several people had stopped what they were doing now, phones forgotten, conversations abandoned, watching this scene unfold with the horrified fascination of witnesses to a car crash. Samuel stood there, rain drumming against the windows behind him, and something shifted in his expression. Not anger, though that would have been justified. Not even hurt, though the words were designed to wound. What crossed Samuel Hayes's face in that moment was something far more complex. It was the look of a man deciding whether or not to reveal a truth that would fundamentally alter the reality of everyone in that room. "You want me to fly your plane, sir?" That's what I said. Unless you're too scared. Unless you want to admit that you're exactly what you appear to be. Nothing more than a man whose ceiling in life is cleaning the floors that his betters walk on. The terminal had gone completely quiet. Even the staff had stopped moving, sensing that something significant was happening. Samuel looked at James for a long moment, then at the Gulf Stream visible through the rain-streaked windows, then back at the young millionaire, whose cruelty was exceeded only by his ignorance. "I'll fly your plane, sir. Under one condition." James's eyebrows rose, amused. "Oh, You have conditions now. This should be good. What's your condition, old man? Samuel's voice remained level, but there was steel underneath the silk. When we land safely in Boston, you will apologize. Not to me. To every person in this terminal who had to witness your cruelty. To your assistant, who you berated on the phone. To the pilot who's in the hospital and couldn't help being sick. And to yourself, for the man you've allowed yourself to become. James threw back his head and laughed, the sound echoing off the terminal's high ceilings. Deal. Hell, if you can actually fly that plane, I'll do a lot more than apologize. I'll give you $200,000. How's that? $200,000 for the performance of a lifetime. Come on, let's go. I want to see this. What, James? Mitchell didn't know. What his assumptions and prejudices had blinded him to completely was that Samuel Hayes had a past that rendered this entire situation almost cosmically ironic. But that truth would wait. First, there would be a journey. First, there would be a lesson. And that lesson would begin the moment they stepped onto that Gulf Stream, when Samuel would move through the pre-flight checks with a precision and confidence that would plant the first seeds of doubt in James Mitchell's arrogant mind. Samuel set down his cleaning supplies and removed his work gloves. His hands, free now, moved with a different quality. Not the hands of a janitor, but the hands of someone who had spent years mastering one of humanity's most complex and demanding skills. He walked toward the exit that led to the tarmac, and James followed, still smirking, still completely unaware that he was about to receive an education more valuable than any his expensive schools had provided. Behind them, the other travelers began to whisper. Some pulled out phones, sensing that whatever was about to happen needed to be documented. Sarah, James's assistant, had arrived just in time to hear the challenge. She stood frozen near the entrance, her face pale, knowing her boss better than anyone and dreading what his cruelty might unleash. Outside, the rain had intensified. Thunder rolled across the darkening sky. The Gulfstream G650, one of the most sophisticated private jets in the world, sat gleaming under the terminal lights. $70 million of engineering, capable of flying nearly 8,000 miles without refueling, cruising at speeds that could outrun most commercial aircraft. And James Mitchell, in his infinite arrogance, had just it. Bet that a black cleaning man couldn't fly it. They climbed the stairs, water streaming off the railing, and entered the aircraft. The interior was exactly what you'd expect from someone like James. Cream leather seats, mahogany tables, a full bar, entertainment systems that cost more than cars. James threw himself into one of the passenger seats, still wearing that smirk, pulling out his phone to record what he assumed would be a humiliating failure. Go ahead. Show me what you've got. And remember, if you can't do it, if you're just wasting my time, I'm going to make sure you lose your job. I know people. I can make one phone call and you'll never work in this city again. Samuel didn't respond. He simply walked forward, past the passenger cabin, past the galley, and into the cockpit. The moment he settled into the captain's seat, something changed. It was subtle but unmistakable. The way his hands moved across the controls. The way his eyes scanned the instruments with the focused attention of someone reading a familiar language. The way his posture shifted into something that spoke of thousands of hours, countless flights, a life lived in the sky. He reached up and adjusted the seat, then began the pre-flight checklist start. Not fumbling, not guessing, moving with the confidence of someone who could do this in his sleep. His fingers danced across switches and dials. He checked the fuel levels, confirmed the weather data on the displays, tested the flight controls, verified the navigation systems. Every movement precise, every action purposeful. And in the passenger cabin, James's smirk began to fade, replaced by confusion. then disbelief, then something that looked like the first stirrings of fear. Samuel's voice came through the intercom, calm and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We'll be departing shortly for Boston Logan International Airport. Flight time approximately 1 hour. Weather looks challenging, but nothing we can't handle. Please ensure your seatbelt is fastened. We'll be taking off shortly." The formal language, the pilot's cadence, the absolute authority in every word. James sat frozen in his seat, phone forgotten in his hand. Around the terminal, the people who had been watching rushed to the windows. Some had called the airport security, but Samuel had already radioed the tower, identifying himself with credentials that made the controller's eyes widen with recognition. Clearance was granted immediately. Samuel Hayes wasn't just authorized to fly this plane. He was one of the most experienced pilots in the country. The engines powered up with a deep, throaty roar. The plane began to move, taxiing toward the runway with the smooth confidence of someone who had done this 10,000 times before. James finally found his voice. Wait a minute. Who are you? What's happening?" But Samuel was already focused on the task at hand. The rain lashed against the windscreen. Lightning forked across the clouds. The conditions were exactly the kind that separated competent pilots from exceptional ones. And Samuel Hayes had logged over 25,000 flight hours. He had flown in combat zones and through hurricanes. He had landed damaged aircraft and saved crews that should have died. The storm outside was challenging, but it was nothing compared to what he had survived. The tower's voice crackled through the radio, giving final clearance. Samuel acknowledged, his voice steady and clear. He advanced the throttles, and the Gulf Stream surged forward, acceleration pressing them back into their seats. The runway lights blurred past. The rain hammered the fuselage, and then, with a grace that defied the weather, the nose lifted and they were airborne, climbing through the turbulence with the steady confidence of a master at work. In the passenger cabin, James Mitchell had gone completely white. His hands gripped the armrests so tightly his knuckles had lost all color. The plane hit a pocket of rough air and dropped slightly before Samuel corrected, and James let out a sound that was half gasp, half whimper. The arrogant millionaire who had mocked and humiliated a man he deemed beneath him was now completely at that man's mercy, 30,000 feet above the earth, in a storm that would have grounded less experienced pilots. Samuel's hands moved across the controls with the fluid grace of a concert pianist. He adjusted their heading, compensated for the crosswinds, maintained perfect altitude despite the turbulence. And as he flew, as he demonstrated mastery over one of humanity's most complex machines, the truth of who he was began to crystallize in James Mitchell's terrified mind. 20 minutes into the flight, the worst of the storm passed. They broke through the clouds into clear air above, and the change was dramatic. Moonlight streamed through the windows. Stars scattered across the velvet darkness like diamonds on black silk. The turbulence faded, replaced by the smooth, steady flight that marked exceptional piloting. Samuel engaged the autopilot and turned in his seat to look back at his passenger. James Mitchell sat slumped in his chair, face still pale, breathing slowly, returning to normal. When Samuel emerged from the cockpit and stood in the doorway of the passenger cabin, the young millionaire looked up at him with eyes that held something they hadn't contained before. Fear? Yes. But also confusion. And the first fragile shoots of something that might, with time, grow into humility. "I think we need to talk," Samuel said quietly. His voice held no triumph, no mockery, nothing that mirrored the cruelty James had shown him. Just quiet, dignity, and infinite patience. He moved to the galley, poured 2 glasses of water, and brought one to James before sitting across from him. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Outside the windows, the world stretched away in every direction. Infinite and beautiful and completely indifferent to human hierarchies. "My name is Samuel Hayes," he began, his voice carrying the weight of a lifetime. "I'm 61 years old. I've been cleaning the terminal at LaGuardia for 3 years. Before that, I spent 35 years flying. I started in the Air Force, trained at the best schools, flew missions in places whose names you'd recognize from news reports. I logged more hours in combat zones than most pilots fly in their entire careers. I saved lives. I lost friends. I did things that earned me medals I keep in a box under my bed because they remind me of pain as much as pride." He paused, taking a sip of water. "After the military, I flew commercially. I was a captain for Delta for 23 years. I flew the same routes you probably take in first class, sitting back there reading your stock reports, never once thinking about the person up front keeping you alive. I trained other pilots. I served on safety committees. I helped write protocols that are still used today. And then, 7 years ago, my wife got sick. Cancer. The kind that doesn't ask permission and doesn't take prisoners. We fought it together for 3 years. Hospitals, treatments, bills that piled up, faster than my salary could cover them, even with insurance. Everything we'd saved, everything we'd built, it all went into trying to keep her alive." His voice softened, carrying grief. That time had eased, but never erased. "She died 4 years ago. The day after her funeral, I sat in our empty house and realized I had nothing left. The medical bills had taken everything. The house was underwater. My pension was gone, spent on experimental treatments that promised miracles and delivered nothing. But more pain. I was 57 years old, and I had to start over. My pilot's license had lapsed during those years of caring for her. I couldn't afford the medical recertification, the simulator time, all the things required to fly commercially. Again. So I took the only job I could find. Cleaning. Making minimum wage, plus $1 more. Invisible work for invisible people. And you know what? I found peace in it. Not happiness exactly, but peace. The floors don't judge you. The trash doesn't care about your history. I could be alone with my thoughts, with my memories, with the life I'd lived and the woman I'd loved. James sat completely still, the arrogance that had defined him just an hour ago stripped away like paint under a pressure washer. His mouth opened and closed, trying to form words that wouldn't come. "Tonight," Samuel continued, "when you made your offer, when you mocked me and assumed I was nothing more than what I appeared to be, I had a choice. I could have walked away. I could have let your ignorance remain intact. But something in me, maybe pride, maybe just weariness with being invisible, made me accept your challenge. Not for the money. Not for the apology you promised. But because I wanted you to learn something that no amount of money can teach. That every person you meet, every single human being you encounter, is carrying a story you haven't heard. That the measure of someone's worth has nothing to do with their current circumstances, and everything to do with their character. That the man cleaning your floors might have saved more lives than you'll ever know existed. That dignity isn't something you can buy or lose. It's something you choose every single day, regardless of what the world throws at you." He leaned forward, his eyes holding James's with an intensity that made the younger man unable to look away. "You know what the cruelest part of your words was? Not the mockery. Not the assumption of superiority. It was the casual nature of it. You didn't even have to think about it. Dismissing me, reducing me to nothing, came as naturally to you as breathing. And that's the real poison in our world. Not the overt hatred, as terrible as that is, but the unconscious cruelty of people who have never once questioned their own assumptions. Who see someone in a uniform and decide in half a second that they know everything about them. Who measure human worth in dollars and status symbols, and completely miss the truth that we're all just people, all struggling, all carrying burdens, all worthy of basic respect. The plane flew on through the darkness, steady and true. James finally found his voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. Doesn't seem like enough. Samuel nodded slowly. You're right. It isn't. But it's a start. The question is, what will you do with this lesson? Will you go back to your life unchanged, telling this story at cocktail parties as an amusing anecdote? Or will you let it transform you? Will you start seeing the people who serve you, who clean your offices and park your cars and make your coffee? Will you wonder about their stories? Will you treat them with the respect that every human being deserves? Not because of what they can do for you, but because of what they are, people just like you, trying to navigate this complicated world with whatever dignity they can maintain. The lights of Boston began to appear on the horizon, a constellation of human ambition scattered across the darkness. Samuel returned to the cockpit, and James watched him go. This man he had mocked and dismissed. This man who had just given him an education worth more than all his millions. The landing was perfect. Smooth as silk, the kind of landing that made passengers applaud in commercial flights. Samuel brought the Gulfstream to a stop at the private terminal and shut down the engines. The sudden silence felt profound, weighted with meaning. They disembarked together, walking across the tarmac where a car was waiting for James. Before getting in, the young millionaire turned back to Samuel. His face had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something raw and uncertain. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. I promised you $200,000. Let me make it 3. Please. It's the least I can do. Samuel shook his head gently. Keep your money. I don't want it. I never did. What I want is for you to remember. This night. Remember how wrong you were. Remember how it felt to realize that your assumptions were not just incorrect but cruel. And the next time you see someone in a uniform, someone serving you, someone you might be tempted to dismiss or mock or ignore, I want you to pause. I want you to remember that you have no idea who they are, or what they've overcome, or what they're capable of. I want you to treat them like they matter, because they do. James nodded, tears streaming down his face now. No longer trying to hide them. I will. I promise you, I will. And I'm going to do more. I'm going to be better. You've given me something tonight that I didn't even know I needed. Samuel smiled then, the first real smile since this whole strange evening began. That's all I wanted. Go. Live your life. Be successful. Get married. Make your millions. But do it with kindness. Do it with the understanding that success means nothing if it comes at the cost of your humanity. He turned and began walking back toward the terminal. James called after him. Wait, will I see you again? Can I help you somehow? Get your pilot's license reinstated. Give you a job. Samuel paused and looked back. I'm exactly where I need to be right now. Someday, maybe, I'll fly again. But for now, I'm at peace with the quiet work, with the invisible labor that keeps the world running. There's dignity in every honest job, and I've learned to find mine again. You just focus on finding yours. And he walked away. Into the night, this man who had saved lives and lost everything, and found peace in pushing a mop, leaving behind a young millionaire who would never be quite the same again. The story spread quickly, as stories like this always do. Several people in The LaGuardia terminal had filmed James's initial mockery. Others had captured Samuel's calm acceptance of the challenge. By the time the Gulfstream landed in Boston, the video had already been viewed thousands of times. By morning, it was everywhere. The hashtags multiplied. The millionaire who mocked the pilot. The janitor who flew the plane. The lesson in humility at 30,000 feet. News outlets picked it up. Commentators debated it. The conversation expanded to larger questions about class, race, respect, and the assumptions we make about the people we encounter every day. James Mitchell, to his credit, didn't hide. He didn't issue a defensive statement through lawyers. Instead, he recorded a video of his own. Sitting in his office, his voice steady, but his eyes still carrying the weight of the lesson he'd learned. He apologized publicly. Not the carefully crafted non-apology of public relations teams, but a real, raw acknowledgement of his cruelty and ignorance. He talked about the night, about Samuel, about the education he'd received. He pledged to do better. And more than that, he pledged to act. He established a foundation dedicated to helping people like Samuel, people who had fallen on hard times through no fault of their own, people whose stories were invisible until tragedy made them visible. He funded programs to help retired pilots maintain their certifications. He provided grants for medical expenses that insurance didn't cover. He created scholarships for the children of service workers, ensuring that the next generation might have opportunities their parents had been denied. Samuel Hayes never sought the spotlight. He declined interview requests. He didn't want to be a symbol, or a story, or an inspiration. He wanted to live his quiet life, doing his work, honoring his wife's memory in the stillness of his own heart. But the impact of that night rippled outward in ways he couldn't have predicted. The people who worked alongside him, the other cleaners and maintenance workers and service staff, who had spent years being invisible, found their voices. They started sharing their own stories. The veteran who now parked cars. The former teacher who cleaned hotel rooms. The engineer who washed dishes. Each story a reminder that we carry entire universes inside us, that our current circumstances reveal almost nothing about our histories or our worth. What happened that night at LaGuardia Airport was more than one man teaching another a lesson. It became a mirror held up to society, forcing us to confront the uncomfortable truth that we judge constantly, reflexively, unconsciously. We see uniforms and skin colors and age and appearances, and we make decisions about people's worth in the space of a heartbeat. We dismiss and diminish and discount, never once wondering about the stories we're missing, the lives we're failing to see, the dignity we're trampling in our rush to feel superior. The truth is, we are all Samuel Hayes. We have all been dismissed by someone who didn't see us clearly. We have all carried pain and loss and triumph that remained invisible to the casual observer. We have all been reduced to our surfaces, while our depths went unacknowledged. And if we're honest, we are all James Mitchell too. We have all made assumptions. We have all judged books by covers. We have all failed to see the humanity in people whose lives don't intersect comfortably with our own. The question isn't whether we've done this. The question is what we do when we're confronted with our own blindness. Do we defend ourselves? Make excuses? Insist that our prejudices are justified by experience or statistics, or the comfortable lies we tell ourselves? Or do we pause, really pause, and consider that maybe, just maybe, we've been wrong? That maybe the person serving our coffee has a PhD. That maybe the man cleaning the floors was a decorated pilot. That maybe the woman parking cars was a surgeon in her home country. That maybe everyone, absolutely everyone, deserves to be seen and respected and treated with basic human dignity, regardless of what job they currently hold, or what they look like, or where they come from. Samuel Hayes continues his work at La Guardia. He arrives at 6 in the evening. He cleans the floors and empties the trash and makes the terminal gleam. But something has shifted. The travelers who pass through that space now, some of them recognize him. They, nod. They say thank you. They see him. Not as a symbol or a viral video or a lesson, but as a person. A human being doing honest work with quiet dignity. And that, more than any apology or any foundation or any public reckoning, is what Samuel wanted. To be seen, to be acknowledged, to exist in the world as a complete person rather than a convenient assumption. If this story has touched something inside you, if it has made you uncomfortable or angry or thoughtful or sad, then sit with those feelings. Let them work on you. Let them challenge your assumptions about the people you encounter every single day. The next time you're tempted to dismiss someone based on their appearance or their job or their circumstances, remember Samuel Hayes. Remember that you have no idea who they are or what they've overcome or what they're capable of. Remember that every person carries a story you haven't heard yet, and every story deserves respect. Because every story hides a truth, and every truth deserves to be heard.